The snowflakes fell like tiny frozen tears from the dark December sky, covering the small town of Millfield in a thick white blanket. Officer Marcus Thompson pulled his patrol car to the side of Highway 9, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air as he stepped out into the bitter cold. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees below zero, and the wind cut through his uniform like a knife. His German Shepherd partner, Rex, jumped out of the vehicle with enthusiasm that never seemed to fade, regardless of the weather. The 4-year-old K9 had been Marcus's partner for 2 years now, and their bond had grown stronger with each passing day. Rex's black and tan coat was thick enough to handle the harsh winter conditions, but Marcus could see the dog's breath forming small puffs of steam as he sniffed the air. They were responding to a call about suspicious activity near the old railroad bridge that crossed Miller Creek. A local resident had reported seeing strange lights and hearing unusual sounds coming from the area around midnight. Marcus had been patrolling these roads for 8 years, and he knew that the bridge was a common spot for teenagers to gather and cause trouble, especially during winter break. The bridge itself was a relic from the 1940s, built to carry freight trains across the creek that separated the residential area from the industrial district. Though trains still used it occasionally, the area underneath had become overgrown with bushes and scattered with debris over the years. During winter, the space beneath the bridge became a natural shelter from wind and snow, making it an attractive spot for homeless individuals seeking refuge from the brutal cold. As Marcus and Rex approached the bridge, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, the officer noticed that the snow around the area had been disturbed. Footprints led in various directions, some appearing fresh despite the continuing snowfall. Rex immediately became alert, his ears perked up and his tail rigid as he caught a scent that made him pull toward the bridge's support structure. Marcus trusted Rex's instincts completely. The dog had helped him solve numerous cases and had never led him astray. When Rex became this focused and determined, it usually meant something significant was nearby. The officer unclipped Rex's leash, knowing the dog would stay close and follow his training protocols. The wind howled through the metal framework of the bridge above them, creating an eerie symphony that echoed off the concrete supports. Marcus could hear the distant sound of traffic from the main highway, but here beneath the bridge they were isolated from the rest of the world. The beam of his flashlight revealed old beer bottles, discarded fast food containers, and several spots where people had clearly made temporary camps. Rex suddenly stopped and began pawing at a large cardboard box that had been placed against one of the concrete pillars. The box was partially covered by a torn blue tarp, and Marcus could see that someone had tried to create some kind of makeshift shelter. His first thought was that they would find another homeless person who needed assistance getting to the nearby warming shelter. As Marcus approached the box, Rex began whining in a way the officer had never heard before. It wasn't the dog's usual alert bark or his playful whine when he wanted attention. This sound was different, almost urgent, as if Rex was trying to communicate something important that he couldn't quite express. Marcus knelt down beside the box and carefully lifted one corner of the tarp. What he saw inside made his heart stop for a moment. 2 tiny babies, appearing to be newborns, were wrapped in what looked like old towels and a thin blanket. They were so small and still that for a terrifying second, Marcus thought they might not be alive. But then one of the babies moved slightly, and Marcus could see the faint rise and fall of their tiny chests. They were breathing, but barely. Their lips had a bluish tint that Marcus recognized as a sign of hypothermia, and their skin felt cold to the touch when he gently checked their condition. Rex continued to whine and pace around the box, his protective instincts clearly activated by the presence of the vulnerable infants. Marcus immediately radioed for emergency medical assistance and backup, his voice steady despite the shock of the discovery. He knew that every second counted in a situation like this. While waiting for the ambulance, Marcus carefully examined the makeshift shelter. Someone had clearly tried to protect the babies from the elements, but the cardboard and tarp were no match for the brutal winter weather. There was no sign of the person who had left them there, and no note or identification that might explain the circumstances. The babies appeared to be identical twins, both with dark hair and delicate features. Marcus estimated they couldn't be more than a few days old, possibly even newborns who had been born very recently. The fact that they were still alive in these conditions was nothing short of miraculous. Marcus removed his heavy winter jacket and wrapped it around the box containing the babies. trying to provide additional warmth while being careful not to move them too much. Rex seemed to understand the gravity of the situation and positioned himself as close to the box as possible, as if he was trying to share his body heat with the infants. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, growing louder as the emergency vehicles navigated the snowy roads toward their location. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as he watched over the twins, knowing that their survival would depend on how quickly they could receive proper medical care. As the first responders arrived and began their assessment of the babies, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the circumstances that had led to this moment. Who were these children? Why had they been left in such a dangerous place? And most importantly, would they survive this ordeal? The paramedics worked quickly and efficiently, carefully transferring the babies to warming blankets and portable incubators. Marcus watched as they were loaded into the ambulance, their tiny forms barely visible among all the medical equipment. Rex sat beside his partner, still alert and watchful, as if he understood that his discovery had potentially saved 2 precious lives. As the ambulance disappeared into the snowy night, Marcus and Rex were left standing beneath the bridge, both of them forever changed by what they had found there. The emergency room at Millfield General Hospital erupted into controlled chaos as the ambulance arrived with its precious cargo. Dr. Sarah Chen, the pediatric emergency physician on duty, had been alerted about the incoming patients during her radio communication with the paramedics. She had dealt with many difficult cases during her 10 years of practice, but the situation involving newborn twins found in sub-zero temperatures was unlike anything she had encountered before. The babies were immediately wheeled into the pediatric intensive care unit, where Dr. Chen and her team began their life-saving work. Both infants were severely hypothermic, with core body temperatures dangerously low. Their breathing was shallow and labored, and their heart rates were significantly slower than normal for newborns. The medical team worked with precision and urgency, knowing that hypothermia in newborns could quickly lead to organ failure and death. Meanwhile, Officer Marcus Thompson paced the hospital waiting room, unable to shake the image of those tiny faces from his mind. Rex had been left in the patrol car with the heater running, but Marcus knew his partner was just as affected by the night's events as he was. The dog had shown an unusual level of distress when they had to leave the scene, whining and looking back toward the bridge as if he wanted to make sure no other babies had been left behind. Detective Lisa Rodriguez arrived at the hospital within an hour of the discovery. She was the lead investigator for the department's Crimes Against Children unit, and this case would fall under her jurisdiction. Lisa had worked with Marcus on several previous cases and respected both his instincts and Rex's remarkable abilities. She knew that the discovery of the twins was just the beginning of what would likely be a complex investigation. As Dr. Chen worked to stabilize the babies, she made some troubling observations. Both infants showed signs of having been born recently, possibly within the last 24 to 48 hours. They appeared to be full-term babies with healthy birth weights despite their current condition. However, there were no signs that they had received proper medical care after birth. Their umbilical cords had been cut, but not with medical precision, and there were no hospital identification bands or any other indicators that they had been born in a medical facility. The hospital's social services coordinator, Janet Mills, was called in to handle the legal and protective custody aspects of the case. She had seen many heartbreaking situations involving abandoned children, but the circumstances surrounding these twins were particularly disturbing. The fact that someone had left newborn babies in such dangerous conditions during one of the harshest winter storms the area had seen in years raised serious questions about the mental state and intentions of whoever was responsible. Detective Rodriguez began her investigation by interviewing Marcus about the discovery. She wanted to understand every detail of how Rex had found the babies and what the scene had looked like when they arrived. Marcus described the makeshift shelter, the positioning of the cardboard box, and the fact that someone had clearly made an effort to protect the babies from the elements, even though it had been woefully inadequate. The detective also requested that the crime scene team return to the bridge to conduct a thorough search of the area. Despite the continuing snowfall, there might still be evidence that could help identify who had left the babies there. They would look for footprints, DNA evidence, personal items, or anything else that might provide clues about the baby's origins. Dr. Chen emerged from the intensive care unit after 3 hours of intensive treatment. She approached Marcus and Detective Rodriguez with cautious optimism in her voice. Both babies had responded well to the warming protocols and their vital signs had stabilized. They were breathing on their own and their heart rates had returned to normal ranges. While they weren't completely out of danger yet, the immediate threat to their lives had passed. However, Dr. Chen had discovered something else that added another layer of complexity to the case. During her examination, she found that one of the babies, a little girl, had a distinctive birthmark on her left shoulder in the shape of a small crescent moon. The other baby, a boy, had what appeared to be a small scar on his right hand as if he had been injured recently. These identifying marks could prove crucial in determining the babies' identities and possibly leading investigators to their parents. The hospital staff had temporarily named the babies Hope and Gabriel, and they had been placed in protective custody under the supervision of the state's child welfare services. Janet Mills explained to Marcus and Detective Rodriguez that the babies would remain in the hospital until they were medically cleared, and then they would be placed in emergency foster care while the investigation continued. Word of the discovery had begun to spread throughout the small community of Millfield. The local newspaper, the Millfield Gazette, had picked up the story from police radio communications, and reporter Tom Bradley was already asking questions about the case. Detective Rodriguez knew that media attention could be both helpful and harmful to the investigation. On one hand, publicity might encourage someone with information to come forward. On the other hand, too much attention could interfere with their ability to conduct interviews and gather evidence. Marcus returned to his patrol car, where Rex was waiting patiently. The dog seemed to sense that something significant had happened, and he watched his partner intently as Marcus sat in the driver's seat and tried to process the events of the night. The officer couldn't stop thinking about how close the babies had come to dying, and how Rex's incredible instincts had been the difference between life and death for two innocent children. As the first light of dawn began to appear on the horizon, Marcus and Rex were finally released from duty, but neither of them would sleep easily that day. The discovery beneath the bridge had changed something fundamental in both of them, and Marcus knew that he would not rest until they found answers about who those babies were and why they had been abandoned in such a dangerous place. Detective Rodriguez spent the remainder of the night coordinating with various agencies and beginning the process of checking missing persons reports and recent birth records. She contacted hospitals within a 100-mile radius to see if any women had given birth to twins recently and then disappeared. She also reached out to social services agencies to check if there had been any reports of pregnant women in crisis situations who might have been desperate enough to abandon their children. The investigation was just beginning, but everyone involved knew that time was crucial. Somewhere out there, a woman had given birth to twins and then made the desperate decision to leave them beneath a bridge in the middle of winter. Whether she was a victim herself or someone who had committed a serious crime remained to be determined. But finding her was now the top priority for everyone involved in the case. The crime scene team arrived at the bridge just as the morning sun began to cast long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. Despite the overnight snowfall, Detective Rodriguez hoped they might still find some useful evidence. The team was led by forensics expert David Park, who had worked dozens of cases involving abandoned children over his 15-year career. He understood the urgency of gathering any clues that might help identify the baby's parents. David and his team carefully documented the makeshift shelter where the twins had been found. They took photographs from every angle, measured distances, and collected samples of the materials that had been used to create the temporary refuge. The cardboard box appeared to be from a large appliance, possibly a refrigerator or washing machine, based on its size and construction. The blue tarp had several distinctive tiers and appeared to have been used for other purposes before being repurposed as a shelter. Inside the box, the team discovered several items that hadn't been immediately visible during the emergency response. There was a small plastic bag containing what appeared to be medical supplies, including gauze, antiseptic wipes, and a pair of scissors that had likely been used to cut the umbilical cords. Hidden beneath one of the towels, they found a handwritten note that made everyone's heart skip a beat. The note was written in shaky handwriting on a piece of torn notebook paper. It read, "Please take care of Hope and Gabriel. I cannot provide for them. They deserve better than what I can give. I am sorry. A mother who loves them." The discovery of the note changed the entire dynamic of the investigation. It suggested that the abandonment wasn't a careless act of desperation, but rather a calculated decision made by someone who believed she was acting in the children's best interests. Detective Rodriguez carefully bagged the note as evidence and immediately called Dr. Chen at the hospital to inform her that the names the staff had chosen for the babies were actually their real names. This remarkable coincidence sent chills through everyone involved in the case. It seemed impossible that the hospital staff had randomly chosen the exact names that the baby's mother had given them. Meanwhile, back at the police station, Officer Marcus Thompson was having difficulty focusing on his paperwork. The discovery of Hope and Gabriel had affected him more deeply than he had expected. His wife, Jennifer, had called him twice during his shift to check on him after hearing about the case on the local news. Jennifer was a nurse at the county hospital, and she understood the emotional impact that cases involving children could have on first responders. Rex seemed equally unsettled by the previous night's events. The normally energetic German Shepherd was lying quietly in the corner of the police station's break room, occasionally lifting his head to look toward the door as if he expected the babies to be brought in at any moment. Several of Marcus's colleagues had commented on the dog's unusual behavior, noting that Rex appeared to be genuinely concerned about the welfare of the children he had found. Detective Rodriguez began expanding her investigation by reaching out to local churches, community centers, and social service organizations. She hoped to find someone who might have encountered a pregnant woman in distress or someone who had recently given birth to twins. The handwriting on the note suggested that the mother was young, possibly a teenager, based on the style and formation of the letters. The detective also contacted the state's Department of Health to access birth records for the past week. If Hope and Gabriel had been born in a hospital, there would be official documentation of their birth. However, the lack of proper medical care for their umbilical cords suggested that they might have been born outside of a medical facility, possibly with the assistance of an unlicensed midwife or even without any professional help at all. Dr. Chen continued to monitor the twins' progress throughout the day. Both babies were showing remarkable resilience and had begun feeding normally. Hope, the little girl, was slightly smaller than her brother Gabriel, but both children appeared to be healthy despite their traumatic start in life. The doctor was amazed by their ability to recover from such severe hypothermia, noting that their survival was truly miraculous. The hospital's social worker, Janet Mills, had been working to arrange temporary foster care for the babies once they were medically cleared for release. However, the overwhelming community response to the story had created an unexpected situation. Over 24 families had contacted the hospital and social services department, expressing their desire to provide care for Hope and Gabriel. The outpouring of support from the community was heartwarming, but it also created logistical challenges for the placement process. Local news reporter Tom Bradley published his first article about the case in the afternoon edition of the Millfield Gazette. The story, titled "Miracle Babies Found Beneath Bridge," included an interview with Officer Thompson and a statement from the hospital about the baby's condition. The article carefully avoided sharing specific details that might compromise the investigation, but it captured the community's attention and generated even more calls to the police station from people wanting to help. One of those calls proved to be particularly significant. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, an elderly woman who lived in a trailer park about 2 miles from the bridge, contacted Detective Rodriguez to report that she had seen a young woman walking along the railroad tracks several times over the past week. Mrs. Hayes described the woman as appearing to be pregnant and looking distressed. She had considered approaching the woman to offer help but had been afraid to get involved. Detective Rodriguez immediately drove to Mrs. Hayes' trailer to conduct a formal interview. The elderly woman provided a detailed description of the young woman she had seen, approximately 17 to 19 years old, with long brown hair, wearing an oversized green winter coat and old sneakers. Mrs. Hayes said the woman had always been alone and appeared to be carrying a backpack or large bag. Most importantly, Mrs. Hayes remembered that the last time she had seen the woman was 3 days ago, and she had no longer appeared to be pregnant. This information provided the first real lead in the case. Detective Rodriguez immediately organized a search of the area around the trailer park and along the railroad tracks. She hoped to find additional evidence or witnesses who might have encountered the mysterious young woman. The timeline matched perfectly with the estimated age of the babies and their discovery beneath the bridge. The search team included several officers and their canine partners, including Marcus and Rex. The German Shepherd seemed energized by the opportunity to continue working on the case that had begun with his discovery of the twins. As they searched the area around the railroad tracks, Rex's behavior became increasingly focused, suggesting that he was picking up familiar scents. Near an abandoned railroad maintenance shed about half a mile from Mrs. Hayes's trailer, Rex alerted to something significant. The team found evidence that someone had been living in the shed recently. There were blankets, food containers, and personal items scattered around the small structure. Most importantly, they discovered medical supplies similar to those found at the bridge, including bloody towels and gauze that suggested someone had given birth in this location. Detective Rodriguez carefully processed the scene, hoping that the DNA evidence from the bloody materials would help identify the baby's mother. The shed provided shelter from the elements and was isolated enough that someone could have given birth there without being discovered. The proximity to the bridge where the babies were found also made geographical sense. As the day progressed, the investigation was gaining momentum. The combination of physical evidence, witness testimony, and the ongoing medical care for Hope and Gabriel was creating a clearer picture of what had happened. However, the most important question remained unanswered. Where was the young woman who had given birth to these children, and what circumstances had driven her to such desperate measures? The DNA analysis from the bloody materials found in the abandoned railroad shed would take several days to process, but Detective Rodriguez couldn't afford to wait for those results before continuing her investigation. The young woman who had given birth to Hope and Gabriel was still out there somewhere, and every hour that passed increased the risk that she might be in serious medical danger, or that she might disappear entirely. Detective Rodriguez decided to expand her search by visiting local high schools and community colleges in the area. If the mother was indeed a teenager, as the handwriting on the note suggested, there was a possibility that she was a student who had been trying to hide her pregnancy from family and friends. The detective contacted the guidance counselors at 3 different schools, asking them to confidentially check if any students had been absent for unusual periods or if they had noticed any signs that a student might have been pregnant. The response from Roosevelt High School was particularly promising. Guidance counselor Maria Santos reported that a 17-year-old student named Emma Rodriguez had been absent from school for the past 2 weeks. Emma was a quiet, academically gifted student who lived with her elderly grandmother after her parents had died in a car accident 3 years earlier. Maria mentioned that she had been concerned about Emma because the girl had been wearing increasingly baggy clothing over the past several months and had seemed withdrawn and anxious. Detective Rodriguez immediately drove to Emma's grandmother's house, a small, well-maintained home in one of Millfield's older neighborhoods. She was greeted at the door by Rosa Rodriguez, a 78-year-old woman who appeared frail and confused. Rosa explained that Emma had told her she was going to stay with friends for a few days, but that was over a week ago, and she hadn't heard from her granddaughter since. The detective gently questioned Rosa about Emma's recent behavior and discovered that the elderly woman had been struggling with early-stage dementia. She hadn't noticed that Emma appeared to be pregnant, and she had been unaware that her granddaughter was in any kind of trouble. Rosa showed Detective Rodriguez to Emma's bedroom, which was neat and organized, with textbooks stacked on the desk and college brochures scattered across the dresser. Among Emma's belongings, Detective Rodriguez found a journal that contained entries dating back several months. The writings revealed the heartbreaking story of a teenage girl who had discovered she was pregnant and felt completely alone and terrified. Emma had written about her fear of telling her grandmother, who was already struggling with her health and financial difficulties. She had also expressed her terror about the prospect of raising children when she could barely take care of herself and her grandmother. The journal entries became increasingly desperate as Emma's due date approached. She wrote about researching adoption agencies but being afraid to contact them because she had no money for medical care and was terrified of the legal complications. In her final entries, Emma described her plan to give birth alone and then find a safe place to leave the babies where they would be found and cared for by people who could provide for them properly. One particularly heartbreaking entry read, "I know I'm not strong enough to raise 2 babies. Grandma Rosa needs me, but she can't help me with this. I've been watching the police officer who patrols near the bridge. He seems kind, and I've seen him with his dog. Maybe if I leave Hope and Gabriel where his dog might find them, they'll have a chance at a real family. I know it's wrong, but I don't know what else to do." Detective Rodriguez realized that Emma had been planning the abandonment for weeks, carefully observing Marcus and Rex's patrol patterns to ensure that the babies would be discovered quickly. This revelation cast the entire situation in a new light. Emma hadn't abandoned her children out of cruelty or indifference. She had made what she believed was a loving sacrifice to give them a better life than she could provide. The detective immediately put out a bolo, "Be on the lookout" alert for Emma Rodriguez, emphasizing that she was likely in need of immediate medical attention and should be approached with care and compassion rather than as a criminal suspect. The alert included Emma's description, her last known clothing, and information about her potential medical condition following childbirth. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Dr. Chen was continuing to monitor Hope and Gabriel's progress. Both babies were thriving and had been moved from the intensive care unit to the regular pediatric ward. The nursing staff had grown attached to the twins, and several nurses had volunteered to work extra shifts to ensure that the babies received constant attention and care. Officer Marcus Thompson visited the hospital during his lunch break to check on the baby's condition. When he saw Hope and Gabriel sleeping peacefully in their cribs, he felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that they were safe and healthy, but also a deep concern for their mother, who was still missing and potentially in danger. Rex had remained unusually focused and alert since the discovery of the babies. Marcus had noticed that his canine partner seemed to be constantly scanning their patrol area, as if he was searching for something or someone. The dog's behavior suggested that he somehow understood that their work on this case wasn't finished yet. That afternoon, Detective Rodriguez received a call from a convenience store clerk named Mike Chen, who worked at a gas station about 5 miles from the railroad shed. Mike reported that a young woman matching Emma's description had come into the store 2 days earlier, looking pale and unsteady. She had purchased bottled water, energy bars, and bandages, paying with crumpled bills from her pocket. Mike said he had been concerned about her appearance but hadn't known what to do. The detective immediately drove to the gas station and reviewed the security camera footage from that day. The grainy black and white video clearly showed a young woman who matched Emma's description. She appeared weak and was moving carefully as if she was in pain. Most importantly, she was no longer pregnant in the video, confirming that this had occurred after she had given birth to the twins. Detective Rodriguez studied the footage carefully and noticed that Emma had walked to the store rather than arriving by car. This suggested that she was staying somewhere within walking distance of the gas station. The detective began a systematic search of the area, checking abandoned buildings, parks, and any other locations where someone might seek shelter. The search expanded to include several other officers and their canine partners. Marcus and Rex joined the effort, with Rex showing particular interest in certain areas that suggested he was picking up familiar scents. The team searched through the afternoon and into the evening, but there was no sign of Emma. As darkness fell, Detective Rodriguez received another crucial call. This time it was from Dr. Patricia Williams, who ran a small free clinic on the outskirts of town. Dr. Williams reported that a young woman had come to the clinic that morning seeking medical help but had left before being seen when she realized that her personal information would be recorded. The woman had appeared to be suffering from complications related to recent childbirth. Dr. Williams provided directions to where she had last seen the young woman walking, which led toward a densely wooded area behind the clinic. Detective Rodriguez immediately organized a search of the woods, knowing that if Emma was hiding there and suffering from medical complications, time was running out. The search team used flashlights and thermal imaging equipment to scan the dark forest. Rex was particularly alert and focused, leading Marcus deeper into the woods than the other search teams. After nearly 2 hours of searching, Rex suddenly stopped and began barking in a way that Marcus had never heard before. It wasn't his usual alert bark or his aggressive warning bark. It was a sound that seemed to convey both urgency and concern. Following Rex's lead, Marcus discovered a small clearing where someone had created a makeshift shelter using branches and a plastic tarp. Inside the shelter, they found Emma Rodriguez, weak and barely conscious, suffering from severe dehydration and infection related to complications from childbirth. She was alive, but just barely. The ambulance raced through the snowy streets of Millfield for the second time in 3 days. But this time, it carried the mother of the twins who had already captured the community's heart. Emma Rodriguez was in critical condition, suffering from severe postpartum complications that had developed from giving birth without proper medical care. Her body temperature was dangerously low, and she was showing signs of sepsis from an untreated infection. Dr. Sarah Chen was waiting in the emergency room when Emma arrived. The same physician who had saved Hope and Gabriel's lives was now fighting to save their mother's life. As Dr. Chen worked to stabilize Emma's condition, she couldn't help but think about the tragic irony of the situation. This young woman had been so desperate to ensure her baby's survival that she had risked her own life in the process. Officer Marcus Thompson and Rex waited anxiously in the hospital corridor, both of them visibly shaken by finding Emma in such a deteriorated state. Marcus had seen many difficult situations during his years in law enforcement, but discovering the barely conscious teenager in the woods had affected him deeply. Rex seemed to understand the gravity of the situation and remained unusually calm and focused, as if he was standing vigil for the family he had helped save. Detective Rodriguez used the time while Emma was receiving medical treatment to piece together the complete picture of what had happened. Emma's journal entries, combined with the physical evidence and witness statements, revealed a heartbreaking story of a young woman who had felt completely alone and overwhelmed by circumstances beyond her control. Emma's parents had been killed in a car accident when she was 14, leaving her in the care of her grandmother Rosa. The elderly woman had done her best to provide for Emma, but her own declining health and limited financial resources had created additional stress for both of them. When Emma discovered she was pregnant following a brief relationship with a boy who had since moved away, she felt that she couldn't burden her grandmother with additional responsibilities and expenses. The father of the twins was 18-year-old Jason Miller, who had moved to California with his family 6 months earlier. Detective Rodriguez contacted Jason and his parents to inform them about the situation. Jason was shocked to learn about the pregnancy and the birth of his children. He explained that he and Emma had lost touch after his family moved, and he had no idea that she was pregnant. Jason and his parents immediately made plans to return to Millfield to be involved in whatever legal and custody arrangements would need to be made. While Emma fought for her life in the intensive care unit, Hope and Gabriel continued to thrive in the pediatric ward. The nursing staff had become incredibly attached to the twins, and several nurses had volunteered to work extra shifts to ensure that the babies received constant care and attention. The hospital had been flooded with donations of baby clothes, formula, toys, and other supplies from community members who had been touched by the story. Dr. Chen updated Detective Rodriguez on Emma's condition after several hours of intensive treatment. The teenager was responding to antibiotics and IV fluids, and her vital signs were slowly stabilizing. However, she remained unconscious and would need several more days of intensive care before her condition could be considered stable. The doctor explained that Emma's survival was largely due to Rex's ability to find her when he did. A few more hours in the cold woods without medical attention would likely have been fatal. The legal aspects of the case were complex and delicate. While Emma had technically committed the crime of child abandonment, the circumstances surrounding her actions raised questions about whether criminal charges were appropriate. District Attorney Robert Hayes met with Detective Rodriguez and other officials to discuss how to proceed. The consensus was that Emma's primary need was medical care and support, not criminal prosecution. The community response to Emma's story had been overwhelming and largely sympathetic. Once the local newspaper published the details about Emma's circumstances, donations began pouring in to help support her and her children. A local church established a fund to help pay for Emma's medical expenses and to provide financial support for the family. Several families who had previously expressed interest in adopting Hope and Gabriel instead offered to help Emma learn how to care for her children if she chose to keep them. Social worker Janet Mills faced the challenging task of determining what would be best for all three members of this fractured family. Emma's grandmother, Rosa, was clearly not capable of providing adequate care for infant twins, and Emma herself was still a minor who would need significant support and assistance. However, the outpouring of community support created possibilities that hadn't existed when Emma made her desperate decision to abandon her children. On the third day after Emma was found, she finally regained consciousness. Her first words were to ask about her babies, and Dr. Chen was able to reassure her that Hope and Gabriel were healthy and safe. When Emma learned that her children had been found by the same police officer and dog she had observed during her planning, she broke down in tears of relief and gratitude. Detective Rodriguez conducted a gentle interview with Emma once she was strong enough to talk. The teenager was cooperative and honest about everything that had happened. She explained her thought process and her desperate hope that someone kind would find her babies and give them the life she couldn't provide. Emma expressed deep regret about not seeking help sooner, but also maintained that she had genuinely believed she was acting in her children's best interests. Officer Marcus Thompson visited Emma in the hospital, bringing Rex with him after getting special permission from the hospital administration. When Emma saw the German shepherd who had found her babies and later saved her own life, she was overwhelmed with emotion. Rex seemed to recognize Emma's scent and approached her bed calmly, allowing her to pet him while she thanked him through her tears. Marcus spoke with Emma about the night he and Rex had found Hope and Gabriel. He assured her that while her method had been dangerous, her love for her children was evident in every precaution she had taken to try to keep them safe. He also told her about the community's response to her story, and the many people who wanted to help support her and the babies. The conversation with Marcus helped Emma begin to understand that she wasn't as alone as she had believed. For months, she had felt that she had no options and no one to turn to for help. The discovery that there were people willing to support her and her children began to give her hope for a future she hadn't been able to imagine before. Dr. Chen determined that Emma would need at least another week of hospitalization before she could be discharged. During that time, social services would work with Emma, her grandmother, Jason and his family, and community supporters to develop a plan that would ensure the safety and well-being of both Emma and her children. The twins remained in foster care temporarily, but arrangements were being made for Emma to have supervised visits with them as soon as she was physically able. The goal was to help her bond with her children and begin learning how to care for them with proper support and resources. Jason Miller and his parents arrived in Millfield and immediately went to the hospital to see Emma and meet their grandchildren. The reunion was emotional and complicated, with everyone struggling to process the magnitude of what had happened. However, Jason's family was committed to being part of the solution and helping to create a stable environment for Hope and Gabriel. As Emma's physical condition continued to improve, she began to work with counselors and social workers to address the emotional trauma she had experienced. The combination of losing her parents, caring for her grandmother, dealing with an unplanned pregnancy, and giving birth alone had created psychological wounds that would take time to heal. 2 weeks after Emma's rescue from the woods, the Millfield community had rallied around the young mother and her twins in ways that no one could have anticipated. The story of Hope and Gabriel's miraculous survival had touched hearts far beyond the small town's borders, with news outlets from neighboring cities picking up the story and spreading awareness about the family's situation. Emma's recovery was progressing steadily, both physically and emotionally. Dr. Chen had been amazed by the teenager's resilience and determination to get better so she could care for her children. Emma had been attending daily counseling sessions with Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a therapist who specialized in helping young mothers dealing with trauma and crisis situations. During these sessions, Emma slowly began to process the events that had led to her desperate decision to abandon her babies. Dr. Martinez helped her understand that while her methods had been dangerous, her underlying motivation had been love and a desire to protect her children. This realization was crucial in helping Emma begin to forgive herself and develop the confidence she would need to be a good mother. The legal situation had been resolved in a way that prioritized healing over punishment. District Attorney Robert Hayes had decided not to file criminal charges against Emma, recognizing that her actions had been driven by desperation and mental distress, rather than malicious intent. Instead, Emma was required to complete parenting classes, continue with counseling, and maintain regular contact with social services to ensure that both she and the babies were receiving adequate care and support. Jason Miller had extended his stay in Millfield and was actively involved in planning for his children's future. He had enrolled in online college courses so he could remain in town longer while helping to establish a stable environment for Hope and Gabriel. Jason's parents had also committed to providing financial support and hands-on assistance with childcare, recognizing their responsibility as grandparents. The most significant development had been the community's response to Emma's situation. A local businessman named Robert Chen, who was also Dr. Sarah Chen's uncle, had offered Emma a part-time job at his small accounting firm once she was ready to return to work. The position would allow her to complete her high school education while learning valuable job skills and earning money to support her family. Additionally, the Millfield Community Church had organized a comprehensive support system for Emma and her children. Volunteer families had committed to providing babysitting services, transportation assistance, and emotional support. A group of experienced mothers had formed a mentoring circle to help Emma learn essential parenting skills and navigate the challenges of raising twins. Most remarkably, Mrs. Elizabeth Patterson, a retired teacher who lived alone in a large house near Emma's grandmother's neighborhood, had offered to let Emma and the babies live with her temporarily. Mrs. Patterson had lost her own daughter in a tragic accident years earlier, and she saw caring for Emma and the twins as a way to honor her daughter's memory while helping a young family in need. The arrangement with Mrs. Patterson solved multiple problems simultaneously. Emma would have adult supervision and support while still maintaining her independence and caring for her children. The babies would have a stable, safe environment during their crucial early months, and Emma's grandmother Rosa would be able to visit regularly without the stress of trying to care for infant twins while managing her own health. Issues Officer Marcus Thompson and Rex had become unofficial mascots of the story, with media outlets requesting interviews about their role in finding both the babies and their mother. Marcus had been reluctant to seek attention for simply doing his job, but he recognized that sharing their story might encourage other people in crisis situations to seek help, rather than taking desperate measures. Rex had received special recognition from the police department for his exceptional service in locating both the twins and Emma. Rico, German Shepherd, had been nominated for a state-level award for police dogs, and his story had inspired discussions about expanding the K9 program in Millfield. Rex seemed to enjoy the attention, but Marcus noticed that the dog remained particularly alert during their patrols, as if he was always searching for someone else who might need help. Hope and Gabriel had been thriving in their temporary foster placement, but everyone involved was working toward reuniting them with Emma as soon as possible. The babies had been visiting with their mother daily at the hospital, and those sessions had been crucial in helping Emma bond with her children and gain confidence in her ability to care for them. Dr. Chen had been monitoring the baby's development closely and was pleased to report that neither Hope nor Gabriel showed any lasting effects from their exposure to extreme cold. Both children were meeting all developmental milestones and showed no signs of the health problems that could have resulted from their traumatic first days of life. Emma's first extended visit with her babies outside of the hospital had been arranged for the following weekend. She would spend an entire day with Hope and Gabriel at Mrs. Patterson's house, with supervision from a social worker and support from several volunteer mentors. This visit would be a crucial step toward determining when the babies could be permanently placed in Emma's care. The teenager had been working diligently to prepare for motherhood. She had completed a basic parenting course and was learning essential skills like diaper changing, bottle feeding, and recognizing signs of illness in infants. Emma had also been reading extensively about child development and had asked the hospital's lactation consultant to help her establish breastfeeding, which had been delayed due to her medical condition. Detective Rodriguez had officially closed the investigation into the abandonment case, but she had remained involved as an advocate for Emma and her family. The detective had helped coordinate the various support services and had worked with the district attorney's office to ensure that Emma's legal obligations were reasonable and focused on rehabilitation rather than punishment. The story had also prompted discussions within the Millfield community about the need for better support services for pregnant teenagers and young families in crisis. The local hospital was considering establishing a program to provide confidential counseling and resources for women facing unplanned pregnancies. Several community organizations were also exploring ways to identify and assist families who might be struggling with poverty, social isolation, or other risk factors. Emma had written a letter to Officer Thompson and Rex, thanking them not only for saving her children's lives but also for treating her with kindness and respect rather than judgment. In the letter, she expressed her commitment to being the best mother possible for Hope and Gabriel, and her determination to use her experience to help other young women who might find themselves in similar situations. The letter had been particularly meaningful to Marcus, who had been struggling with questions about whether he and Rex could have somehow prevented the entire crisis if they had been more observant during their earlier patrols. Emma's words helped him understand that their role had been to save lives, not to prevent every tragedy from occurring in the first place. As Emma prepared for her transition to independent motherhood with community support, she had begun to envision a future that she hadn't been able to imagine during her darkest moments. She planned to complete her high school education, pursue vocational training in healthcare or social services, and eventually help other young mothers who faced similar challenges. The upcoming weekend visit with Hope and Gabriel represented more than just another step in the reunification process. For Emma, it symbolized the beginning of the life she had always wanted to provide for her children but had never believed was possible. The journey from that desperate night beneath the bridge to this moment of hope and possibility had been longer and more difficult than anyone could have anticipated, but it had ultimately led to something beautiful. 6 months later, Emma Rodriguez stood in the kitchen of Mrs. Patterson's house, preparing bottles for Hope and Gabriel as the morning sun streamed through the windows. The twins were now healthy, happy 6-month-old babies who had no memory of their traumatic first days of life. Hope had developed into a cheerful, curious baby who loved to babble and reach for colorful toys, while Gabriel was more contemplative but quick to smile when his sister made him laugh. Emma had successfully completed all the requirements set by social services and had been granted full custody of her children 3 months earlier. The transition to independent motherhood had been challenging, but the support system that had formed around her family had made all the difference. Emma was no longer the frightened, isolated teenager who had felt that abandoning her babies was her only option. Mrs. Patterson had become like a grandmother to the twins and a mentor to Emma. The elderly woman's large house had been filled with the sounds of children's laughter for the first time in decades, and she often said that caring for Emma's family had given her a renewed sense of purpose. The arrangement had worked so well that Emma and Mrs. Patterson had decided to make it permanent, creating an extended family that benefited everyone involved. Emma had completed her high school education through an accelerated program and was now enrolled in community college classes, studying early childhood development. Her goal was to become a certified childcare provider and eventually open a support center for young mothers facing crisis situations. She wanted to use her experience to help other women understand that there were alternatives to desperation, and that asking for help was a sign of strength, not weakness. Jason Miller had also remained actively involved in his children's lives. He had transferred to a college in a nearby city and visited Hope and Gabriel every weekend. He and Emma had developed a mature co-parenting relationship based on mutual respect and their shared commitment to their children's well-being. While they had decided not to pursue a romantic relationship, they had become good friends and effective partners in raising their twins. Officer Marcus Thompson and Rex had continued their regular patrols through Millfield, but their perspective on their work had been permanently changed by their role in saving Hope, Gabriel, and Emma. Marcus had started carrying additional emergency supplies in his patrol car, including baby blankets, formula, and basic medical supplies, just in case they encountered another situation involving abandoned children. Rex had become something of a local celebrity, with children throughout the community recognizing him and wanting to pet the dog who had saved the twin babies. The German Shepherd seemed to enjoy the attention, but Marcus noticed that Rex remained particularly alert during their patrols near the railroad bridge and other areas where someone in crisis might seek shelter. The success of Emma's story had inspired the Millfield community to establish the Hope and Gabriel Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting young families in crisis. The foundation provided emergency assistance, counseling services, parenting education, and temporary housing for pregnant women and young mothers who needed help. Emma had become a spokesperson for the foundation, sharing her story to raise awareness and funds for other families facing similar challenges. Dr. Sarah Chen had followed Hope and Gabriel's development closely and was amazed by their resilience and healthy growth. The twins showed no lasting effects from their exposure to extreme cold, and both children were meeting or exceeding all developmental milestones. Dr. Chen often used their case as an example of the importance of immediate emergency intervention and the remarkable ability of newborns to recover from trauma when provided with proper medical care. Detective Rodriguez had been promoted to sergeant and now oversaw the department's Family Crisis Intervention Unit. She had used the lessons learned from Emma's case to develop new protocols for handling situations involving abandoned children and families in crisis. The department had also established partnerships with local social service agencies to ensure that people in desperate situations could access help before reaching the point where they might take dangerous actions. Emma's grandmother Rosa had moved into an assisted living facility that specialized in caring for people with dementia. The move had been difficult emotionally, but it had ensured that Rosa received the specialized care she needed while still allowing her to maintain regular contact with Emma and the twins. Emma visited her grandmother twice a week, often bringing Hope and Gabriel, whose presence always seemed to brighten Rosa's day. The community support that had rallied around Emma's family had never wavered. The church's mentoring circle continued to provide guidance and friendship, helping Emma navigate the ongoing challenges of raising twins while pursuing her education and career goals. The volunteer babysitting network had allowed Emma to attend classes and work part-time without worrying about childcare costs. Robert Chen's accounting firm had become Emma's permanent employer, and she had proven to be a dedicated and capable employee. Her work schedule was arranged around her class schedule and the twins' needs, and she had already been promoted to a position with greater responsibility and higher pay. Robert often said that hiring Emma had been one of the best business decisions he had ever made. The story of Hope and Gabriel's rescue had attracted attention from beyond Millfield, with Emma being invited to speak at conferences about teen pregnancy prevention and crisis intervention. She had appeared on several television programs to share her story and advocate for better support services for young families. Emma always emphasized that her decision to abandon her babies had been wrong, but she also stressed the importance of creating communities where people in crisis felt safe asking for help. One of the most significant developments had been the establishment of the Baby Safe Haven program at Millfield General Hospital. The program allowed mothers to safely surrender newborn babies without fear of prosecution, providing a legal alternative for women who felt unable to care for their children. Emma had been instrumental in advocating for the program, arguing that it could prevent other families from experiencing the trauma that hers had endured. Officer Thompson had been honored by the State Police Association for his role in the case, but he always insisted that Rex deserved most of the credit. The German Shepherd's instincts and determination had been the key factor in locating both the babies and their mother. Marcus often reflected on how different the outcome might have been if Rex hadn't been so persistent in investigating the makeshift shelter beneath the bridge. As Emma prepared for another day of classes, work, and caring for her children, she often thought about the night she had made the desperate decision to leave Hope and Gabriel beneath the bridge. She still felt guilty about putting her children in danger, but she had learned to forgive herself and focus on being the best mother possible moving forward. The twins had become symbols of hope and resilience for the entire Millfield community. Their story had reminded everyone that even in the darkest circumstances, love and compassion could create miracles. Hope and Gabriel would grow up knowing that they were not only loved by their mother and extended family, but also cherished by an entire community that had come together to ensure their survival and success. Emma often stood at the window watching her children play, marveling at how much their lives had changed since that cold December night. She knew that the journey ahead would continue to have challenges, but she also knew that she was no longer facing those challenges alone. The love that had initially driven her to desperate measures had ultimately led to the creation of a support system that would nurture and protect her family for years to come. The story that began with abandonment and despair had become a testament to the power of community, compassion, and second chances. Hope and Gabriel Rodriguez Miller would grow up surrounded by people who believed in the importance of helping others and the possibility of redemption, ensuring that their miraculous survival would continue to inspire acts of kindness for generations to come.